Okay, we're going to close out the Learning and Development Summit with a predictions panel. And we've got 3 of our speakers who in a moment will introduce themselves to share their predictions. I'm Barbara Lombardo. I'm the program director for the summit. And I'm really excited to hear their predictions. I'm going to start with my own questions, and then I've got a series of questions from participants that we will pose as well. But first, let me ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bob ZImel with Solvay Corporation. It's a large specialty chemicals company based in Brussels. I work out of our New Jersey office, and we're a global organization with about 150 sites, heavily industrial.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Drapkin, based here in New York City. I'm the Director of Client Success at Degreed. Prior to Degreed, however, I was in L&D myself at a technology company based here in New York City, responsible for client, employee, and partner enablement. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Laura Rodino. I work for Prudential Financial. And our business is both international and national in terms of insurance and financial services products, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And I'm going to start with a few questions of my own. You know, a little context, though. I think predictions are, by their nature, forward-looking, but I also think it's really important to take a retrospective approach as well and think about the predictions that we have made over the years that did not occur. And I have one that of my own, to share with you that made me think to start with this kind of question. 9, 10 years ago, do any of you remember Second Life? So I was in a leadership role around learning solutions at the time, and we were so into Second Life and spent a lot of money, building out this is virtual reality for those of you who may not know, building out virtual reality environments. We experimented extensively with it, with ourselves and with clients. We held learning events, and we really, really were buying into that this was going to be, the future of learning. And it was a lot of fun. I loved having a little avatar, and I could dress her up, and it was really fun. But it didn't happen. It had this wave, and for a variety of reasons, which, I won't go into, that didn't happen. It went the way of MOOCs and, some other things that we all thought were going to happen. We bet on, predicted, and then didn't. And I think we have a lot to learn about, if we think back retrospectively, about those things that we thought were going to happen that didn't, sort of the false predictions. So for that reason, I'm going to start the panel with a question for our panelists about a prediction that they might have made 5 or more years ago, that they really believed in, that didn't occur. Tell us about that. Tell us about why you think it didn't happen, or what you learned from that. And Bob, I'll start with you.
I enjoy playing with languages. Learning might be a little extreme, but playing with. So over the past 5 years or so, I've used Duolingo and Mango, a little app on my phone. And I use it, and I enjoy it, and I never seem to stick with it. So my prediction 5 years ago was mobile will be a much more intense part of the learning experience. And in my experience, we certainly can do it, but it has not been a big part of how we offer learning. So we think of learning has to be very complex, a social component, a synchronous and asynchronous component. And I think we've done a lot of that well, but I don't think we've leveraged mobile as much as I thought we would have. I think there's an incredible power in mobile. We'll talk, if we talk the future 5 years, about how that might play out, and I think it'll be very strong, but the information and the personal connection we get with a mobile device is so powerful, and learning can be incredibly powerful, but we're not doing a wonderful job as an industry yet in marrying them. So that would be my perspective.
So this isn't necessarily a prediction that I had that didn't come true. It's something that I could have never imagined 5 years ago. And that's the breadth of data that we have available at our fingertips. So 5 years ago, I was living in a world of completions, whether it be completions in the physical classroom, completions in the virtual classroom. Now when I partner with customers on them, helping them to tell their story using data. At the simplest level, it's, okay, who are my activated users, recently active? Who are my learners? Which users are social? What employees do I have that are contributors to learning? At the simplest level, you heard Ekta talk about yesterday, looking at searches and taking courses and taking content and mapping that to the searches that are happening in Degreed. That's at the simplest level. And then Rich and I were just talking about XAPI and API functionality around data and being able to collect, this is more at the advanced level, but being able to collect every single learner activity or employee activity. And then it becomes a problem of, okay, well, I have so much data at my fingertips. What is the story that I need to tell within that? And 5 years ago, I was so heads down in the life of completions that I could have never imagined how much data we'll be able to collect and track and use to tell our stories today.
Thanks. So as I think back 5 years and then, and some, when MOOCs, and we heard COOCs and yesterday, and free universities, so open university and free-to-you universities, there was a legitimate fear across the industry and peers of mine that would replace our corporate universities, that people would choose to go outside of the corporate wall and get whatever it was that they needed and wanted, and it would even to at some point drive potentially a decision to not fund some of the corporate university courseware or offerings. And of course, now that we are where we are right now, we've seen that corporate universities are alive and well and are starting to re-engineer themselves. So that didn't necessarily play itself out the way we thought it would.
Good. Okay. Those were great kind of look backs. How about looking forward? Share a prediction that you have about the future of learning, 5-year time horizon. What's your prediction and what will its impact be? And Jenna, let's start with you. Caught you off guard there.
You did. I'm happy to kick things off. Thank you, Barbara. So my prediction is that I truly do believe, Laura, I agree, corporate universities aren't going anywhere. But where the way in which L&D strategizes, operationalizes, and the technologies that we use to support us, going back to yesterday's discussion with Colgate, that is going to morph, that is going to transform, and it already is. So strategy in the terms of we have occasional opportunities for upskilling or reskilling employees, now moving into the need for continually needing to upskill employees. Operationalizing, meaning L&D is moving away from being the gatekeepers to learning to now they are the gateway. And we heard Michael earlier talk about experiences for employees around learning. That is the future. And then lastly, technologies, needing to move away from rigid all-in-one tools to more flexible, interconnected ones so that as your employees change the way that they learn, you can change the technology that's supporting that.
That was wonderful, Jenna. As I think 5 years from now, and sometimes it is hard to imagine, and I often catch myself fantasizing about, but just imagine if we had this. We have so much data in terms of our employees' activity, things like a meeting. You can record them. Phone calls, if you're a registered representative, are recorded. And we monitor so many data points that people touch. What are they searching for in our own internal corporate portals? What words are meaningful to them? And what I'd love to be able to see, different than how it's being done now, is that we can take all of that data, all of that indistinct data, and find a way to real time send a status to an individual that says, over the last course of the week, you have engaged in a number of different meetings, and here are 2 coaching points for you, or 2 resources that you may be able to access, or 2 individuals who are experts in this space that you might contemplate. But doing so that there's no real human intervention in that, but that it's done automatically. So that's what I'd like to see.
And
So wish as well as a prediction. Exactly.
And that's a theme for me too. I was thinking about the proliferation of data, and how when I go into a store, the store knows I'm in there. When Amazon shops for a product, Facebook knows to push this ad out to me. So there's so much information that we're monitoring. And honestly, without getting provocative, there's a lot that we don't know that they're doing as well. I'm going to bring you into my bedroom for an analogy. It's a PG one or a G one, so it's kind of good. My wife and I were thinking about, where should we go the weekend after next? And we said, oh, I don't know. We've been to a lot of these places. Driving distance, what do we know? So we're just kind of thinking about it. CNN's on. We're watching news. We're not paying attention. Shut the TV off. We both turned to each other and said, why don't we go? And it was almost within the same 30 seconds that we said, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Well, we get up in the morning, and Facebook has an ad from that place that we have never discussed in 10 years. And it's not a it's not a coincidence. There's something going on. I have plenty of those examples where we've had these conversations. So that phone, of course, is on, and from what I hear, it doesn't matter if it's on or not. But the amount of information that we know, I'm fine with that, because I think it's being used for a really great targeted purpose. And my story is, I don't think in learning yet we're anywhere near making the data that we have as useful. So it is automating it. I think the smart push technology will get way better. I think learners will become centered right now. It doesn't feel learner-centric. It feels like, oh, cool, you had an engine behind the scene taking data from my corporate registration and evaluation, and now you pulled something to me. So it almost feels a little mechanical, but I think we'll get a lot better at that, to the point where it feels very seamless, feels very welcome to the learner. The organization is getting great tailwind because what we're doing is safe, it's effective, it's doing a lot of what's streamed through all of our sessions yesterday. It's about doing what we do better, more modern, more efficiently to benefit the organization and the learner. And I think learning is not on the cutting edge generally when we're adapting technology. And that's fine. It can go pilot in many other parts of the organization, parts of the world, parts of the economy. I think we need to get closer to that forefront, because again, 20 years ago, we said human capital is a differentiator. It's probably going to show up on financial statements because it's that important, right? It never did, but it is such a differentiator, and we need to bring that learning, development, and retention of people much more to the forefront, and we're the enablers of it. We don't keep it, but we're the enablers of it.
Thank you very much. And we've covered everybody on that question. Good. Okay. We're going to now shift to the questions that I collected from the summit participants. And so already we have themes. We've got themes around data and how it's used. We've got themes around technology and themes around just being learner-centric and how that works. And it's interesting to me as I kind of leafed through these questions how much those themes are very much embedded in these questions. So I'm going to start with one around technology. And let me, Laura, pose this one to you. How will automation and AI, or artificial intelligence, change the velocity of learning needed and the skill sets most valued for business professionals? So impact of increased automation and AI on learning.
That's a fantastic question. And I love the word velocity, because we hear that a lot at Prudential. At the pace, first of all, in which change is being introduced, both technology and digitally, we have to be able to get ahead of never mind react to when things are presented. So, in terms of artificial intelligence, I think many companies are just getting their feet wet. Some are obviously a lot farther ahead than others. I think it will become an integral part of what we in learning and development have to rely on. I think we underestimate the power of what people touch and think about and do, and I think we have to leverage that more than we've ever, I would imagine, have done before. And I think the other thing that's important is there's always this point in time, speed of the day, fire to put out now. What are we planning for in terms of the next quarter? So this ability to react quickly and accurately and customize what we do react and provide, I think is critical.
Oh, great. Thank you. Now, each of the tables that are participating gave us a prediction of their own as well as a question. So, Jenna, I'm going to share with you the prediction that this same table made that posed that question and just invite you to react to it. And this is about kind of changing workforce. The prediction is the gig economy will be a hindrance to effective, sustainable culture within business. And of course, that anything having to do with culture, has implications for learning. So what's your reaction to that, the impact of the gig economy on culture?
Well, I think, so Michael spoke about this earlier, going back to the values, going back to the basics. And I think that is a theme that we are going to see more and more companies do. They're realizing how important, there's so much noise going on, especially in the gig economy, that it's important that we go back to the basics, that we focus on those, that we take a moment to reflect and realize why we're all here, why we're all working for that company. And yeah, I think we're going to see a trend. I'm agreeing with the prediction, and I think it's going to cause a trend where we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to put more emphasis on values within the organization, and also learning as a corporate strategy and as a competitive advantage is going to be more and more prevalent in the next 5 years because of that.
Great, thank you. This next question, Bob, is perfect for you because yesterday you shared with us the digital journey that Solvay has been embarking on with respect to learning. So very much this is in your wheelhouse. Do you predict that the development of digital learning will get easier and faster? And in paren, oh please, I wish. There you go.
By nature, it will. Technology advances very quickly. We adopt very easily new technologies. I do believe that we will become much better at leveraging what we've seen elsewhere and bring that to the learning organization. It's almost coming back to the gig economy comment and answer in a moment. And we've got to re-engineer how we think about culture. We've got to re-engineer how we think about the learning culture inside a corporate culture. And then we have to think about how do we change our mindset from being controllers to being enablers. And it's certainly been a theme I've heard at conferences recent past. How does learning step away from and let the learning happen, yet make sure it's happening in a wonderful way without the control? So I think digital technology will allow that to happen. I believe learners will get smarter pushes. I believe social learning will be so much more powerful when I pick up my phone and just say to the phone, hey, ask Mary how she did that. I know it was a week ago. Sometimes I don't even have to pick up the phone, right? I can say, a week from now, just go ask Mary how it was when she delivered that. And the phone's going to know, here's why you're doing it, here's what you get. So I believe that social interaction, which we love when we're in the classroom, again, no matter what our style is, there's a benefit to being in a role play, a breakout room, a separate activity, a worksheet on your own. And I believe technology is a very strong enabler to all of that. It's just a matter of making sure that we don't put technology ahead of the learner or ahead of the solution. It's got to be an enabler, because we've all probably buried a technology that we thought was going to be great because of the technology, and it turned out it didn't really matter that much. It was something other than the technology that was driving it. So I think we'll absolutely see a strong push and learning being much more enabled digitally, and not just for sake of percent of digital versus non-digital learning, but truly capturing the heart, the spirit, the minds of the learners by bringing the technology to them, not purely cost of savings or easier facilitation.
Thank you. So another question related to technology, and in this case I'll pose it and then I'll invite whoever of the panelists has a thought to respond. And this table makes me think about the comment I made at the beginning of the panel related to Second Life, which I think actually didn't have its day largely because the technology really wasn't there, to keep up with the vision, or to deliver the promise of the vision at the time. So this table predicts that virtual reality will become ubiquitous in L&D in less than 5 years. And their related question then is, in what ways will virtual reality impact L&D, and how quickly? So basically, how do you respond to their prediction about the ubiquity of virtual reality for learning? Who would like to respond first?
I think it will play a greater role. I don't know that it's going to be as magnificent as it could be. And again, it kind of comes back to what do we do in learning and how do we enable it? How do we make it available to people? Where's the balance between safety and risk and being bold and imaginative? I think certainly there will be great pockets of it. I was at one of the large software companies a month ago for a conference board council meeting, and we had a great opportunity to see kind of a future office workspace and what it might look like. And boy, there were things that I would have never dreamed were happening, and they actually do it in this real life lab. So I think it will become a much greater place in what we do, but I don't know that it's going to feel like learning. It's going to feel like part of life. I'm going to go have a chance to jump in. And the best learning doesn't feel like learning. It's like, oh, wow, at the end of the day, these all cool things happened. I pieced them together. I got something, and that's great. So it's almost like I'm not getting onto the portal to check I want to learn today or tell my phone, hey, what can I learn about at the moment? I believe it's just going to happen as a natural, normal part. I don't think 5 years. I think 7 to 10 years is when it's truly going to make its mark. And I know most times when you have a panel talking about technology, everybody says, I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think to make all of that work and work well, I believe it's going to take longer for our organizations to learn how, to fail, to try to get better at it. And I hope we all learn from each other to bring it in 5 years. I think 5 years is a little aggressive on that front.
So it's been interesting to see at the HR Technology Conference earlier this year, VR played a really big role at that conference. I've heard from a lot of different companies that it's more heavily used today in onboarding or in preparing for a really big event, such as for retail employees preparing for Black Friday. So I think it will be more heavily used in onboarding. Not every single training that an employee goes through will be VR-based 5 years from now. And also, it will be interesting to see how it's used for hourly employees versus corporate employees as well.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that, I think and I hate to answer that with an it depends, but I really believe that if we experiment more with it, I think that prediction in its various forms will come true. I think our entry level and younger generations want to experiment with that, and we need to meet them where they want to learn and what they want to experience. So I think we probably need to just experiment more with it.
And I think a lot of it has to do with cost. How soon will costs come down in programming custom scenarios, in wearing glasses, doing the things that allow us to have that VR experience? If it moves more quickly, to scale and cost, I think it would be great. We have loads of opportunities in our industrial sites, and we're not doing it because we choose other ways that are less cost effective that give us 80 to 90% of that experience anyway.
Great. Thank you. Okay, this next prediction and related question get us back to the theme of data and measurement, which I think will be a recurring theme in these questions. This table, first, I'll share with you, predicts that we will see a significant advancement in innovation and technology to evaluate, measure, and create analytics to better inform effectiveness of training in the next 5 years. So they're predicting better kind of tools and approaches to do measurement. And then their question is, how do you think the measurement of learning will evolve in the next 5 years? And that could be how we do it, how we measure, what gets measured, how we use the learnings or the insights that the data provides us, any of those. So anyone want to start?
I'll start. I think, based on what I've seen over the course of my lifetime in this particular discipline, I think we are measuring the things that we have available to us. I think we miss out on a lot of opportunities, one, because our clients, whether they're internal or external, they struggle with breaking down and digitizing and having access to a lot of the real meaningful measurements. And so that in turn rolls downhill to all of us, and we're hindered by not being able to get at some of those measurements. So I think we, in partnership with them, have to absolutely help them to define what is most meaningful in terms of measurement to get at the real value that a learner really is looking for. And so I think we have some work to do there.
I agree with everything that you've said, Laura. I think we'll be set up very nicely in the next 5 years for being able to capture and tell the story around more learner activities and the points throughout the learner experience that matter. I think a bigger, loftier goal for us is being able to put together an ROI model for learning in the next 5 years, one that is a robust ROI model is something that I've heard from many of you today and yesterday that you're challenged with, and I think we need to get better at telling the story, and then from there, hopefully, I hope I'm wrong, and I'm sure I will be, but 5 years from now, being able to have that model will be the bigger, more audacious goal.
I think it's interesting when we talk about measuring human performance, because we can measure errors, right? Six Sigma a long time, and L&D doesn't often do Six Sigma studies about how it serves its customers. We do some, but not that much. And that's been around for a while. I believe with technology better able to micro-measure, I think we will get greater hints at it. I don't know that we're going to have technology measuring all of my managerial choices, but I think when it comes time to problem solving, yeah, if I log in, when did I solve a problem, when did I have a problem, because it's just a part of naturally what I do, we're going to be able to correlate, are people better problem solvers when they focus on problem solving as a skill. And I think there are many of those data points. We have to figure out what we want to capture from human performance, and then figure how do we actually write a plan to develop and measure that. So I think it will be greater than it is today. I think in some of the facets that we support in business, it'll make a huge leap forward, and in other ones it will be just kind of a steady step forward. I think it will be a powerful tool, though, in the future.
Yes, and this next table had a prediction that I think is a wonderful way to sort of wrap up everything you've just said about data. They said in the next 5 years, the learning function in any organization will have to have cracked the code on demonstrable ROI, measured in dollars, to the business, regardless of the type of training or content. So there's the prediction that we're going to need to, hold ourselves and demonstrate that result for accountability. Looks like you all strenuously agree with that. Yeah? Okay.
I'm seeing pieces of it come together which is great, around corporate goals for internal mobility or needing to reskill employees or better retain employees. So I'm looking forward to, over the course of the next 5 years, it's a challenge, and I think the three of us here and all of us in this room recognize that. But I'm excited for us to put those pieces together and come up with that ROI model together.
Any other comments on that? Okay. Just shifting gears. We're getting away from this could be broadly answered, but we're getting away from the themes of technology and of data. And here's an interesting question. What might be the next traditional practice, and that's in quotation marks, that we question our assumptions about, as we did with performance management? So what are we, another way to rephrase that is, what are we doing today that, we think makes sense that we might come to question our assumptions about its impact or its effectiveness? Can you do that? Laura?
I don't know that I would say it's an about face, but I think it's a significant turn. When we look at coaching and mentoring, we spend a lot of time in organizations knowing it's incredibly powerful, and I've seen some wonderful models about either coaching and or mentoring, how they're done. I believe technology can play a great role enabling that coaching and mentoring. I think the social component is really important. You honestly don't need a lot of what we try to do now to make mentoring and coaching work. In a state of equilibrium, people are finding and people are giving. When you have this kind of cryptocurrency about people exchanging human information and performance ideas and suggestions, by nature, we're proud of what we know, what we do. We'll be willing to share it. Certainly, we know the needs exist. So I think it's going to become a more social dynamic where we get our mentoring and coaching, and it might be inside the organization or outside. So I don't know that it's going to be as formal as almost every example I've seen now happen, but I do think it's a different way of doing something more powerfully for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. One thing that I would add to that I would love to see stopped in terms of a prediction would be those smiley sheets, as some people call them, level ones. It's just such a false sense of security in terms of, were people happy what did they think of the training? We kind of view it as, these are table stakes. We hope that we've done something and put something in front of you that you would feel energized about. I think the real critical part of it is, so what's happened now that you've left the classroom? How do we stay in touch with you to know if what we've done or what you experienced actually made a difference for you? And frankly, what does your manager or your peers think about what you're doing now that you've gotten what you've gotten when you were with us?
Jen, anything to add?
The only thing I would add, and you brought this up, I believe, in your talk yesterday, is having to build everything, especially e-learning, from scratch. I think we will see instructional designers move more from content builders to curating, and then adding specifically what is your own to that. Because we're all moving to, we're talking today about the environment we're in, how quickly it's moving. We don't have time to build everything from scratch. So I do believe that's something that will be challenged and changed.
Thanks. Okay, another shift of topic here. We've heard a lot about the role of gateway to learning versus gatekeeper. We're talking about the L&D function. How do you see this impacting the role of learning design in the future? Want to go first?
Sure. I think it'll make a significant difference. I do have a major theme through a lot of what I talk about, especially on a panel, is about learning and development getting out of the way of and being enablers. And I think in this case we will truly see where we step away and we see the power of the system happening on its own. So yeah, I think it's an easy step forward. I think we've got to give up the control piece and let it happen naturally, and there's more enablers than there used to be to creating that success environment. But Again, you talk about firewall, you talk about privacy, so there are things that we do inside our organization that we wouldn't let go outside depending upon the industry, and that has a dynamic as well. How do we censor and keep the private information in that sharing? How do we let it happen in a more engaging manner otherwise?
That was perfectly said.
The one thing that I would add to that is we heard in a couple of presentations that reference to the 70-20-10 model. And I think we often try and stretch the 10%, that formal learning. Some people, you hear them say it's everything but the kitchen sink kind of experience. And it over-engineers what people really need to get started and really get them quickly in the environment where they're going to have to do and use whatever it is that you've exposed them to. So let's really stick to that formal learning and what they need to know right then, and then move them into an environment where they can actually apply, be coached, and experience what they're actually needing to do.
Ah, good. And that's actually kind of related to this next question. And I just want to comment, you're all so versatile. I mean, the nature of this panel, I'm kind of taking these questions in the order that they are in my hand as opposed to thematically organizing them. And you're all really showing your agility by being able to bounce around between technology and data and many other questions.
Well, your transitions actually help. You give us 30 seconds to think when you say, you know what you said, I'm going to build upon that. So thank you.
And I talk slowly. Okay. So if training is becoming more learner-centric, what's the right, well, first, I guess you could question whether that premise is valid. What's the right mix of learning tools and resources to provide so that learners don't become overwhelmed?
Jenna? Sure. I think having a front door for learning is key. And even though there are many tools that could be powering that learner experience, it's important that the learner doesn't see all that we see behind the doors. So there may be a bunch of different tools that are powering that experience and that journey for the learner, but all they should see is ideally one front door for learning.
I think it parallels what we'll see outside of the world as well. Twitter's an amazing tool. Yeah, I have to go enter a pound search to find something what I want. Why doesn't Twitter already know which are the 3 things I go check all the time? What are my searches? Who am I following? What's the correlation between them? And then the engine ends up pushing things that are smarter to me. And I think we'll see a lot more of that in the learning space, that there's better curation, better first aggregation to get it all visible, then better curation, and with the user feedback continuing to refine what we opt in, what we opt out of in a very simple way to make that even more powerful so the learner doesn't feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, I love what you both have said, and I think it's a bit, and I'll call it a pet peeve of mine. What do we not know about our employees? We know a lot about them. I go to the old, I've heard quoted, know me, entice me, enhance me, and please me. You think about Amazon. The minute you sign in, they know exactly what it is that you've either bought in the last 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the case may be. They know what your preferences are. And why can't we do that with our, with our employees or our learners in terms of we know what they do, we know where they're from, we know what they have to do, but based on what they're assigned to. So let's help them with that and give them what they really need and when they want it. I mean, who doesn't? I have 5 children. Their life is on their phone. They know what they need, and the phone knows them, and it pushes all kinds of things to them. So I think if we can do more of that, I think we'll give them what they want and when they want it.
Good, thank you. Okay, a couple of questions related to also the L&D function itself. I'm going to start with the prediction and then the question. So in the last 5+ years, we've experienced a relatively strong economy and therefore decent funding of L&D. And I'll elaborate that we've actually heard stories about that in the last day and a half with the building of a huge learning center, with investments into learning for the whole person, like we heard about from some of the speakers. Then they say, though, this will change when an inevitable economic downturn or recession occurs, there was a huge drop in the Dow yesterday. Maybe that prompted this question. Like, when's that next recession hitting? So the question then, that's the premise, what are you doing to prepare for the inevitable, they're assuming, reduced L&D budgets and increased scrutiny on the L&D spend? So that gets back to the ROI theme, right? So what are you doing in your organizations, or what do you see, organizations in general doing to prepare for the inevitable reduction of L&D budgets? I think the assumption here is, a pattern or a pendulum swing, like so many things, and then that increased scrutiny on L&D spend.
I'll start that.
Okay.
I think that it's the work that we're doing now. One of the ways that at least I've seen and experienced, both positively and negatively, is making sure that whatever it is that the L&D organization is doing, it's tied to true, real business strategies and business metrics. Because value is in the eyes of the beholder. So while we could create a number of different fantastic things, if it isn't perceived that there is value with that, and that's true of those of us that are consumers, right? We will pay whatever it is that we want to pay and invest in what we want to pay if we deem that there is value in that. So I think making that connection, continuing to make the connection, and having, I would say, a really strong relationship with the business decision community, I think is a good thing for all of us in the L&D community.
I would agree. Learning as a strategic function, having the C-level executives understand that learning is a competitive advantage and the costs that it's saving them on their bottom line. And then also the last point you mentioned,
And I would say it has a lot to do with accepting what 80-20 means to your organization, because there's a lot of things that we could do 80% pretty darn well with a significant reduction in costs. We end up paying a lot more for the high Hollywood production, or bringing some, speaker in when you could have found somebody else externally. And that doesn't mean any of that is not valuable, but when it comes time to the weaker economy, we've got to say, what choices were we making all along, and how do we continue to make those choices in this new environment? It's generally temporary, whether that means 9 months or a few years. Generally, there's a relaxation when the economy starts to happen again. So you may have learned things in the weaker economy that you then take forward when you're doing it differently. I think it's about a continued learning, a constant mindset that it is going to happen, and what do we do to make smarter choices about where we invest? What can we do on our own with acceptable level of quality or acceptable reach, and still say it's a wise choice?
I have kind of a follow-up question to that occurred to me when we were talking about the economy. The job market right now is so hot, and I think I've had many conversations with people who are having trouble filling positions. They just can't hire quick enough or find the right people quick enough. So given that context, to what extent have you seen learning and the opportunity to learn at your organization be used as a strategic differentiator for recruiting and hiring? Are you using that as a kind of a value proposition?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly jump in and say I'm speaking to more and more companies that are leveraging the idea of pre-boarding. So as they hire someone, maybe they're a little greener than you would have ideally liked to have filled the position with, but they're using learning as a competitive advantage to pre-board the employee. Maybe I was speaking to someone who was saying from the time that they are in college, they will pre-board this employee if they have 1 year left in school, but they know that they're going to sign on with them come end of May. They will pre-board them their last year of school, and I just think that idea is fantastic.
And by pre-boarding, are they investing in that individual in terms of learning?
Yes.
Already?
Yes. Wow. Could be up to a year, up to a year before they actually come on board.
Yeah, I would say that is exactly right. When the region or the population is limited, the best place to go is to most often the source. And I think corporations partnering with academia, building curriculums, business curriculums that are an easy transition from academia into, let's say, and for our instance, a corporate environment, is an easy transition because we've influenced what it is that they need to know. We've already got a population that we're looking at. We already have an expectation that positions will be available. And so we are using that as part, we're experimenting that with a university in El Paso, Texas right now at Prudential. And so we've built 2 business school curriculums we've weighed in, for example, like underwriting or things that they wouldn't normally include in their business courses, and made it appealing so that they're learning and it's not so scary when it comes time to start their first job. So yeah, it works really well.
And simply, I think the learning is an important part of the culture that you send out to people when you're looking for the future talent and or you're retaining existing talent. And I think the more that we do to leverage that, to make it seamless, to tell stories, it's not bullet points on a chart, it's people you know, it's videos you see, it's experiences you had, touch points in the real world. I think those are the things that are getting easier and more prolific to help that culture drive that learning as part of human performance.
You know, I have another question related to leveraging learning in a really tight, hot job market. I actually, before this event, had an email exchange with the person from the Navy who kind of manages their relationship with the conference board. And the question he posed to me, and I actually said, maybe we'll be able to address this in the prediction panel, so this is great. His question was, and he started with the preface that, in such a tight, hot job market, they're seeing the need to upskill or reskill their existing employees because they just can't recruit the skills that they need fast enough. And so the question is, are you experimenting with that at all? Is learning, the learning function playing a role in upskilling, reskilling, and that having that be a sort of strategic answer to the barriers to being able to recruit and hire those skills quick enough?
I'd say a lot of it has to do with kind of the gig economy and how people feel like they fit into organizations. We certainly look for more opportunities to leverage a data scientist part of their time and bring them in. Whether it's share with another part of the organization or share externally, I think there are parts of what we do where we don't necessarily need all of that in our face on our budget at one time. So I think you get more flexibility the more you kind of think about a different ecosystem of the talent.
And to Bob's point, the ecosystem that I'm seeing right now related to skills is, first, you need to define what those skills are. Then you need your benchmarks, right? So we need to measure those. Then we need to put programs in place to help people grow those skills. Matt, I love how earlier you had a focus on 5. I think that's a great place to start for your leadership across the organization. And then from there, you have to measure progress. And it's this never-ending cycle that you go through to define, measure, grow, look at progress, and you go through that over and over and over again.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing that I would add to that is, we use the term talent mobility. So when people, their first week in their job, we start talking about what's your next opportunity. And sometimes it often catches people off guard a little bit. Well, I just got here. Exactly. And you're going to be here for a really long time. We're expecting you to stay. And we want you to start thinking about all of the forward momentum that you believe you will have here. And that sort of helps condition the mindset that they're here, they're growing, they will continue to grow, and we will continue to invest in them.
And just because the economy is in its state right now doesn't mean that there's switching in between companies any differently than they were. So you might have the lull where people become more available in the market, but still the better employers, the better cultures are going to continue to attract people, and the ones that can't adapt are going to be left behind because the talent doesn't want to be there. So it finds its own equilibrium anyway, whether unemployment is at 10% or it's at 3%. It's still your conscious choice to be a part of an environment or not.
Thanks. One further question related to talent, and this specific to learning. Over the last day or so, we heard about people from outside, traditionally outside of learning kinds of backgrounds, adding value and being brought into the learning function. We heard about a user experience designer being hired at Colgate-Palmolive. There was another presentation yesterday, and forgive me, I can't recall the organization, but that was being led by someone out of marketing.
Colgate.
Was that them as well? Okay. So I used two examples from the same organization, but we've heard several stories around people with different skill sets coming into learning, and learning needing different skill sets than the very traditional kind of learning technology folks and instructional designers. So the question is, in terms of a prediction, where do you see that going? Do you see that expanding? What other kinds of skill sets do you think learning is going to need in the next 5 years?
I would start off, since nobody else did.
Well, you look like you were right on your way, Bob.
I was thinking, at least.
To interrupt that.
I think a lot of it has to do with how do you collaborate inside the organization. I don't know that I need to go out to consultant to get it. A lot of the times what we know about diversity and inclusion is you've got that potential inside. So when we're building a team of user experience focused work, let's go get somebody who represents the person that we're doing it. So you don't have to go contract with them. Go get somebody finance who might be in a very different mindset than the innovation team, or get somebody from our industrial organization if you're working on marketing. So it's taking that point of view that you can easily access and getting them engaged to produce the right than it is just bringing in a job description that says I can do X. I think when we're broader, we end up bringing more power to the organization, and we end up building the talent future pipeline greater as well.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that's probably on my team one of the biggest challenges is stop talking in terms of L&D speak and start talking in terms of business speak, so that your recipients of your message and your solution can translate that easily into how what you're going to do is going to help them do what they need to do. Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger challenges, and I would agree 100%, Bob, with what you're saying.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to what Bob and Laura said is that I've also seen this transformation of sorts happening in HR as well.
Yeah, in the broader.
Yes, in the broader scheme of things. So not just in L&D are I seeing companies leverage people with different backgrounds, with different skill sets, but really strong in experience, really strong in marketing, really strong in just their people skills. But I'm seeing that happening in HR as well.
Yeah. Great, thanks. Okay, two final questions, and these are both kind of formulated in a way that helps us to integrate all that we've talked about in the last day and a half and reflect on those. One of the tables, and I'm going to paraphrase their question, but they observed some trends, that were kind of integrating the themes that they heard over the last day and a half. And they concluded that we as, in learning are going to have to be more agile. We're going to have to increasingly and continuingly leverage technology. We're going to be required to use data for insight. And they added, and also know how to kind of leverage what works and back to the basics. So with those that's their observation. So the question then is, how do we do that? And I'd also invite you to comment on those imperatives. Are there others that you'd comment on, or any comments on these? Again, being more agile, leveraging technology, using data for insight, and I guess it's kind of knowing when to go back to the basics. Commenting on those, adding to them.
So I'll say how I ended yesterday's discussion with ACTA. It's reject what is, this is what Bruce Lee said, not my words. I believe it was accept what is useful, reject what is useless, and then add specifically what is your own. And I feel that can be applied to those 4 themes that you discussed. And it's a little more theoretical than giving the exact how. But I would just add that in terms of the how, we really need to lean on and learn from one another as we all go through these 4 themes and go through this transformation together.
Yeah, I think those are great assessments of what, the messages or the themes of the agenda that was put together for the day and a half. I think the other thing, too, is we have to really understand who the learner is. And they are multifaceted, multi-generational. The complexity of our workforce now is quite different. So leverage that, get up close and personal to that. And I think those themes, we'll leverage them best as we know best. And I think if we can correlate a learner journey with a customer journey, we spend a lot of time trying to really understand our customers. I'll use, again, I'll go back to an example, and I think, Bob, you started with this, and I'll hopefully finish with this, is the Amazon journey. They have several touch points along the way in terms of how they know who you are and how they understand and keep you engaged on an ongoing basis. There's these simple, quick, endearing ways that we stay in touch with them. And I think if we can do that and correlate that with our learner and the journey that they are on when they first start with us and maybe until the day they retire, I think that would be great.
I think having people in your team that have a high level of learning agility is really important. I think forcing people to think out of the box, think differently, put things together in a different way, hear a customer, make something meaningful out of it, have a synapse fire, make some connection. I think that's a really important part. So having learning teams that aren't as traditional and linear and prepared. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a COE of great designers and great facilitators, yet in that there needs to be a dynamic that operates more like a Microsoft or an Apple or an IDEO or something that just breaks all tradition and goes for something new and different. And I think that's really important. I'd also say playing with technology. And I'll tell you, I'm not a gamer. And that's something that I need to change because the world is learning from how we game. And if it's understanding an algorithm, a way of measuring an experience I had, it's something that's going to help me better in strategizing and delivering learning in a way that's more meaningful. So I pledge to go game every now and then.
Great, thank you. Okay, for the last question, I'm going to return to those themes that I called out this morning from what we heard yesterday around the balancing act that I think L&D is always having to achieve. So I'm going to just restate those and invite each of you to comment on them if you would add to them or if you have thoughts about, I think of each of these as spectrums. And if you have any thoughts on, where in the pendulum swing, we are or we're going to be, just comment on those. So broad question and kind of a way to invite you to give us your final thoughts. So just as a reminder, those tensions, and again, I kind of picture these as spectrums that we try to find the right place along, are how to be both high tech and high touch, how to personalize and customize even as we need to scale, how to leverage tools without them becoming ends in themselves, and how to change continuously while maintaining, some kind of stability and predictability for ourselves and our teams. So thoughts on those? What's the most challenging? Where do you see things heading along those spectrums?
I can start with one, and I reserve the right to do another one afterwards. Regarding high tech and high touch, I don't really think they're one side of the pendulum and the other side, because I believe when we have really good tech, it improves the touch. It improves the experience. It's little nudges along the way. It helps me along. I may or may not ever seek that high touch personal piece, but I'm getting it. And I think about, you know, my daughter's generation who says, oh, I spoke with Dave. You spoke with him? Yeah? Yeah, I typed a couple letters and they got it. And I didn't even say the words. I knew what I meant. And all of a sudden there was this connection there. So we think of touch and tech maybe in a different way, and I believe that that technology ends up being a tailwind for the touch, even if it's not the physical group hug touch that some of us may want or think. And it's happening, and we will continue to embrace it, but everybody will embrace it differently. It's making sure that we look for something in that to embrace, because it is continuing to be an important part of the future.
You know, I love that you saw that as a false dichotomy. And basically that's what you're saying, that you can do both of those things together. And I wonder if any of these other, you know, spectrums or tensions that we are balancing, that there might be a way of reframing them as not an either or, but a both and. So, interesting answer. Comments on these others? And I can repeat them if you'd like me to comment on?
I would just say what I took away from the themes that you just stated is how important it is that we lean on and learn from one another, given all of the changes that are happening right now within L&D. And I would just say that my biggest prediction of all of the ones that we've talked about today is 5, 10, 50 years from now, 500 years from now, it doesn't matter. We will still be relying on our networks and relying on each other to learn. And that is so important that we continue to learn from one another and continue the conversation around these themes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Laura, final thoughts.
Yeah, final thought would be, don't be afraid to experiment. You know, this whole notion of prototyping and quick turnaround, and let the real people who are the consumers for what it is that we produce, let them taste it, try it, and let us know what they really think. Because so much time can be wasted, and then at the other end of the spectrum, so much more time can be used to create what they really want. So that's what I would say too.
Wonderful. And did you reserved the right to come back. Did you want to share a final thought, or you're good?
I'll use it in the future.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Great. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank all of the participants for your very provocative questions and predictions. And I want to thank our panelists, Laura and Jenna and Bob, for their very provocative thoughts. Thanks very much.